In this video, we're going to put together everything we've learned and build our first Autom. We'll construct an Autom that automatically generates a Jira ticket upon receipt of an email at a designated email address. The scenario is straightforward. Upon receipt of an email at the specified address, the Autom will initiate and establish a connection with Jira to create a new issue. To begin, let's concentrate on the fundamental building blocks of this Autom, which are prevalent in numerous Autom implementations. First, we need to set up your Jira credentials. To do this, let's head over to the Vault in the Management section, and we can click on New App Credential in the top right. Then we can scroll down and find the application we need, in this case being Jira. And here is where we're going to put in our connector name, the authentication type, and then link it to our Jira instance. For this, I'm going to call it test. Then I'm going to select the authentication type, which for this will be OAuth 2.0. And then finally, we'll input our Jira Software Cloud URL, which for me is this, but obviously your one will be different. It's normally your company name, .atlassian.net. Or if you're using a different application, obviously you just want to connect it to that application. Once everything's inputted in there, we can click on connect, and it should take us to Jira, where we can give it access by hitting accept. And there we go. If you've got multiple boards in your Jira instance, it will ask you which board you'd like this Autom to connect to. But because I only have one in mind, it didn't need to ask. So that's the first bit. The Jira credential is in there, safely stored in our vault. Next, we need to add our email credentials. There's multiple ways of doing this. I'm going to do it this way just to show you how it can be done. So we're going to go to custom credentials here and then add new credential. This is going to be the email address and password of the email inbox that we want to listen to using our Autom to set up Jira tickets automatically. For the credential name, we'll call it email server info, so it's easily findable. Then we need to add our variables. We'll add two for this, the first one being our username and the second one being our password. We can mask these so that they can't be noticed by anybody else. So for our first one, we'll call it username. For our second one, password. You can then add a description if you'd like, or just move straight onto the variable value, the value being the actual email address, name, and password. For this example, I'm going to be using my Gmail account, so it's going to be automate.will@gmail.com. Again, this is the email address that the Autom we're going to build is going to listen to. And when an email comes into it, it's going to activate Jira and create a ticket. Then obviously below that, we need to input our password. And again, because we've clicked is masked, it will stay hidden. There we go. Then we can click save. And our email server info is here. So now our email address is ready to go. Again, there are other ways to input this. You don't have to do it this way, but this is just one way of doing it, and it stores it safely within the vault, ready to be used for other Automs if needs be. So now we have our Jira and email credentials set up in the vault and they're ready to be used in our Autom. The next thing to do is create the Autom itself. Again, there's multiple ways to do this. We can click on Create Autom down here, or we can go to My Environment, Automs, and Create New Autom. Doing it this way will allow you to give it a name instantly and sort out everything so it's easily findable later down the way. Let's call this one Email Trigger Test. We can then select our Autom type, which we'll just use Autom. We can give it a description if needs be. We can add it to a group if we want to. And then we can select the Mate agent, which we want this Autom to be a part of. We then also have the option to enable it as a queue or non-queue. I'm just going to leave that unticked for now. Then we can click Create. And here we go. This is where we can start to build our new Autom. So, as I've mentioned, this Autom is going to listen to an email inbox, meaning it's going to be triggered by email. So, we can select our trigger type here and select email. Then we can click on Configure Trigger. And here is where we can input everything we need for this Autom to be able to speak directly to our inbox. For this example, we're going to use IMAP. So you want to make sure that your IMAP settings are configured within your actual email client. And again, because we're using Gmail, we need to input Gmail specific settings. For this, host is going to be imap.gmail.com. The port is going to be 993. Obviously, if you're using Outlook or any other email providers, the port and host will be different, but they're easily findable. Then we can define the period of how often you would like this Autom to check the inbox for new emails. For this, let's just do every 120 minutes. Below that is where we're going to select our credentials. We made these earlier. So we can click on this arrow next to user and either use a connection or a custom string. Custom string meaning instead of creating the variable like we did earlier and storing it within the vault, we can just do it as a one-off here and input our email address here and then do the same for password. But because we made the email variable before, we can click on this, click on email server info, and attribute is going to be username for this one. And then below, we'll do the same for the password. And that will use the variables that we created earlier and just input them into this Autom. Again, you don't need to add credentials to the vault if you don't want to, but if you're going to find that yourself using that inbox or those variables for multiple different Automs, it makes sense to have them ready to go. Next, we need to configure an output variable. So we can hit this plus, and this gives us the page to create a new variable. The variable type for this one is going to be array, as we are recording the output of the email. This variable enables us to use the payload data from the emails that we receive. For the name, let's call this response email. It's good to use names that you can remember so you know what you're clicking on and what you're using when using different Automs. We can then give it a display name if we want to and a description and set it as either an input or an output. Then we can click save again, and that configures the trigger for this Autom. If we need to change things later down the line, we can just click on configure trigger again and update it as needs be. Below the output variable, we can select different conditions if we want to. These allow you to select conditions that you might want this Autom to look for within the emails themselves, such as who it's from, CC, or maybe even certain words in the email subject line, or any of the options below here. For now, everything's good as it is. Let's just click save. Now, it's good to check and test as we move forwards along with these things to make sure that everything's working as intended. So firstly, I'm going to click on Save Autom, just so we don't lose our progress. Then, below Save Autom, we've got the Run Autom button. Here is where we can check that the email and the fetching is all working perfectly. We can click on Start Email Fetch. And there we go. Email fetching has started. If this isn't working, you'll get an error message, and you'll know that something has gone wrong along the way. But this is working, so let's click on Stop Email Fetch, and we're good to carry on with building this Autom. So, once we receive emails to that email inbox, we want our Autom to create a ticket within Jira. So, let's head over to our applications and find Jira, which is right here. Then we can drag the Create Issue action between our Start and Stop buttons. You will see that on the right-hand side, the Action Control Center pops up. We can use this to put our credentials that we made earlier into it. This will allow us to connect this action to our Jira credentials that we set up before. So let's find that, and there it is, Test. You'll also notice that the Data Manager also becomes available to us when we add in our credential. This allows us to add more fields if we want more specific inputs for this action. We can also use it to define the type of issue, whether it's a task, story, epic, or any from the list. We can do this by selecting our project key, and then selecting the issue type, whether it's task, epic, subtask, story, or bug. For this, we'll click on epic and connect. And once that's done and connected, we've got all the available fields that we can add, customize even more things that we can fill in the Action Control Center. You'll also notice that some of the default fields have already been filled in, once that we connected to that environment within the Data Manager. The ones that have been filled in are what you'd call stable settings. Let's minimize the Data Manager and focus just on the Action Control Center. You'll see the only field that's left to be filled in is the summary. Here is where we can write the summary of the issue that we're dealing with. For example, for this, I can just do Automate, Test, Epic. Because this is a default value, when the Autom is triggered, we will see the summary name for every issue that this Autom inputs into the Jira instance. And with that filled in, let's click on Save. And there we go. Now we can test this by writing an email to our address and seeing if everything works. So I'm going to head over to my Gmail. I'm just going to send an email to this email address. So here's our test email, and I'm just going to click on send. Once you've sent an email to this inbox, being sure to use any specific wording requirements you may have set, then we can click back on our Start Email Fetch button, and if everything's set up correctly, it should work perfectly. This means that when we go over to our Jira instance, we should see a new issue that's been created based on that email that we've just sent to that email inbox. Once you've sent an email to this inbox, and there we go. Heading over to Jira, we can see that this Automate Test Epic issue has been created. It's got the name, which is the summary that we inputted earlier. Now, because we haven't specified what we want it to take from the email, we can just see that this is a basic way of setting up how to connect an email inbox to Jira to create issues. If we set certain parameters, we can make it take certain parts of the body, let's say, or the subject of the email, and input it into the issue within Jira. But so far, this has just been to show you how you'd set something like this up, and we can go into more detail of how we can customize it moving forwards. So heading back over to our Autom screen, what we've simply done is create an email trigger that's listening to an email inbox, and then getting Jira to create an issue immediately from listening to that email inbox and any incoming emails to it. This is how you build a basic flow that will automatically create a Jira ticket from a simple email being sent to a specific inbox. Now, let's look at how we can make this Autom even more powerful. Let's say we want to be able to store the data that is taken from the emails and used to create tickets in Jira inside of an Excel file, all within the same Autom. This will help you to keep track of everything that flows through the Autom. We want to make one Excel file that will store all of the data. To do this, let's go to the Mate drive and create a new folder within the Mate drive. So here we can go on Root, click New Directory, and let's just call it Excel Files, for example, and click on Create. Now, below Root, we've got our Excel files. Then, within the Mate drive, we can upload our Excel file that we want this Autom to write to. So let's click on Upload, and then I've made this Excel file, which is just a blank Excel file that's ready to receive any data that this Autom wants to write to it. So let's open it, click on Upload, and now that's stored within our Excel files folder within our Mate drive. When you click on it, you can see that you can either delete it or download it if you want to be able to analyze the data. Now we can close out of this, and let's say that we want to be able to read that Excel file, or we want this Autom to be able to read that Excel file. So we need to add the Read Excel File action above the Create Issue action. So let's go over to here on our left and find Excel, right there. And let's find our Read File action. Drag it over and place it above the Create Issue. Next, in the Action Control Center, we can click on Custom String, and you'll see that there's the Mate Drive icon right here. We can click on this, head back to our Excel Files directory, click on the file that we want to use, and select File. For this instance, we want to have it to read and write, but you can have it so that it's read only if needs be. And then we can click on Get Sheets. And you'll see if you scroll down, all of the sheets within this file are going to be available to us. I put 3 sheets in this file just to show you that it's read all of it and it can see each of the 3 sheets. Next, we need to define the data tables. So let's click on the plus next to sheet 1, and this will allow us to record the data. We'll need to create a new variable for this, and it will be a data table, and we can just call it data table. And again with the display name, data table, and the rest can be left blank, as we can define the output by using the Jira output. So click Save. So now we can check the response data. For example, if the response line is bigger than 0, let's say, we can understand the data. But if the length of the response data is less than 0, it means that there's no data in the trigger. To sort this, we need to create 2 separate conditions below our read file action. What this essentially means is, let's say an email comes into the inbox that is of no use to this Autom. We need a way that a Jira ticket won't be created. For example, if the information within the email is less than 0, We'll make it so that it won't create a new Jira ticket, and it will simply inform the person in control of this Autom that an email has come in, but it is not usable within this Autom. And then the alternative to that will be if the value of the email is greater than 0, it will create a new issue within Jira. So let's go down to our Transform tab, and we can find our conditions. We need an if condition below the read file Excel sheet, and we need an else condition next to that. We can center the focus this so we can view both of them. Then we can click on our if condition and add a condition itself. The condition is going to be length, as we're checking the length of the email. Our source value is going to be the response email variable that we created earlier, so we can select that. We'll do this without the index, and then we can click add. Then, as this is the if condition of if the email length is greater than 0, we're going to select greater than, with our target value being 0. Then we can click on add, and this condition is now set. You can see length, response email is greater than 0. And now for the else condition. This is for when the value is less than 0 within the email received. We can make it so that it will paste a message directly that this ticket will not be created and that there was an error. To do this, let's go back down into our Transform tab, find string, and we're going to assign a string action below the else condition. Now, we need to create a variable for the value to assign. So let's go back up to the top on the left-hand side of the screen, click on Variables, and add New. The variable type is going to be string. The variable name is going to be error mail. And under default value, we can put ticket creation fail, for example, which is what the Autom will send out as a message upon this happening. Then we can click on Save and head back to our value to assign, click on the plus button, the drop-down menu, and click on our error mail variable that we've just created, and then click on Add. The second thing is source to be assigned down here. We need to create another variable for this so that every time we need this Autom to assign the error mail default value, it will happen automatically. So let's create a new variable again as a string. We can call this one ticket status, and that's all we need. Click on Save, head back to source to be assigned, head back to source to be assigned, click on the drop-down menu, and click on ticket status. So what's happening is the flow is triggered, but the trigger has no response data from the email as there is no payload data. Simply put, if there is data to be assigned, the Autom will flow through the if condition, but if there is no data to be assigned, it will flow through the else condition and produce an error message. Both of these events can be made to push out an email to any given address informing the user of the creation of a ticket or an error due to lack of data needed. To do this, we need to go to our email actions within our integration tab, right here, and we're going to drag the send email action below the create issue action that we have on our page already. Then you can see in the Action Control Center, we can input all the details for this different email address that we want to connect to, so that we can gather all the data within so it can be monitored by someone if necessary. Now, let's go back to our if condition. Remember, this is for data that is greater than 0. Let's create a new variable once again, this time being string once again, but under the name success email. And for the value, it's going to be ticket creation success. Then we can click on Save, and we can add a new string assign action below the if condition. We can then set the value to assign as that new success email variable that we've created. The source to be assigned can again be the ticket status variable that we created before. What this is doing is creating a message to the customer depending on the data found in the email. The person behind the output email address can see the outcome of incoming emails as to whether a Jira ticket has been created or not, based on the values of the incoming emails. Now let's talk about the repeat actions. So imagine you set the period of the trigger to 1 hour, and in that time you get maybe 6 emails. You'll need to process each email one by one. Instead of doing that, we can use the repeat action so that the Autom will run for every single email that is received within that time frame, even if the Autom only runs once every hour. Essentially, it will repeat until all of the new emails have been processed, and then it can stop. So, Underneath our transform tab, we can use the repeatable actions here and drag the repeat action below the string assign action underneath the if condition column. In the action control center for the repeat action, under repeat source, we can choose for each mail in variable. We do this because we're using email, so directly we can use this one. For data of this list, we need to use the response email variable that we made earlier, right here. And then finally, we need to create a new variable for the assign the current value to variable box right here. To do this, we can click on the plus button. Variable type will be object, and the name can be repeat object. And then we can click save. And this configures our repeat action for our email. We then need to create another variable for an assign string action. Because I assigned my response data as an array, now we need to put this as a string variable to my emails. So we need to define the indexes of the data and extract and assign the data to any string variable. So let's go back to string and grab the assign action and put it below our repeat action. We need to set this as response email again, but this time without an index. So let's click back on value to assign and choose response email right here, add without an index, and then add. But now we need to add some text after the response email wording here before the hashtags. This text is going to be 0 and then body. This is because the body of the text from the email that we want to collect data from is organized in this format. Writing the variable like this will enable the Autom to know what data you want to collect from the email. In this case, being the body of the email, and which part of the body specifically. Then we need to give it a name under source to be assigned. So click the plus here and add a new variable. We'll just call this mail body. This new variable will again be a string, and we can just call it mail body, so we can easily find it later if we need it. Then we can click save. So far, we've assigned our ticket statuses, one being error mail and the other being success, which will create a Jira ticket. If the length of the response data is greater than 0, it will be a success, and if the length is less than 0, it will create an error. Then our repeat mechanisms will make sure that if multiple emails are received, they will be processed one by one. We can use the split variable to only select certain parts of the email body that we want to be used in the ticket creation. To do this, let's stay within our string actions here and drag split below the assign variable that we've just added here. The source string is going to be our mail body that we just created down here. Add that. And below this, we have the delimiter. For the delimiter, we need to define what we want the split action to get from the body of the email. So let's say you input what needs to be in the Jira issues between parentheses. We can simply put parentheses. And this will tell the Autom that it needs to take the data from within that specific text requirement, for example. And it will put that into the Jira ticket. Then, for the assign output to variable, we need to create a new variable again, this time being an array, and we can call it mail body array. So array, and the name mail body array, and click save. So now we can change the location of the ticket creation to the if condition column by scrolling down, dragging our create issue, and putting it below here. This is because we only need to create an issue if the value of the data within the email received is greater than 0. If it's not, we only need an error message to display. We do not need to create an issue. However, we will leave the email sending for both of them, as we still want to receive an email if an issue is created or if there is an error alert. This will allow you to keep a log of everything that happens within the Autom, regardless of the outcome. Now, let's go back to the Jira create issue action, so we can enable it to use the mail body as the description of the Jira ticket. To do this, we want to use the data manager, and we want to be able to use the description field, which we can add by simply clicking on it, and below here, you'll see in input fields, we now have description. We would like the description of this to be our mail body array variable that we created earlier. If we click on that plus, we only get access to our mail body, but this isn't the array version. So an easy way to get the mail body array variable is to click on the split string that we made earlier, click on copy, head back to our create issue action, and simply paste it into our description of the Jira create issue action. We then need to add a 0 inside of square brackets after the words to get to the part of the email body that we want to use. If we want to use the subject of the email instead, we can change the summary of the Jira action up here to our mail body array variable that we created, again in square brackets, 0, and then subject. This will make the value of the subject into the ticket subject, and the email description will be the ticket description. Now that all that's sorted, we can look at how we can use the Excel sheet we integrated into the Autom before and attach it with the data from the emails into the output emails that will be sent out following each ticket creation or failure, along with the updated Excel sheet as an attachment. So let's go to our Excel library actions again, right here, and we're going to use our right cell action just above the email. Our Excel source option is going to be the only one we've created, data table. And then we need to set a range. So let's just do A1 for the first cell in the sheet. Then our value can be our ticket status right there, and click add. This will put our ticket status into that first cell within this sheet, being A1. We can then, for example, create a new right cell action below that one, following the exact same rules as before. So data table being the source, but our range this time being B1 for the next cell down. And the value here, for example, is going to be our ticket link, specifically the ticket link within Jira. So to do this, we need to head back to our Jira instance. So here's the ticket that was created earlier. You'll see at the top, we've got a link here. We can copy this, and just to show you, I can put it in here in the comments, and you can see the format of how our links are given to us. So you have HTTPS, and then the name of your company, .atlassian.net/browse. This is all a stable link. Everything after that stable link is going to be the variable. That's what changes depending on the ticket that this is. So Automate 20 in this case is the key to this specific ticket. The next ticket along might be Automate-21, etc., etc. So let's copy everything up until that specific key for this ticket. Then we're going to head back to our Autom, and we're going to create a new variable by clicking on Add New up here. This variable is going to be a string. The name, for example, can just be Jira Env or Jira Environment. And the default value is going to be that stable value from the links of the tickets that we're going to be using, not including the key. We can then click Save and go back to the second right cell that we were making here for B1. And we can add to the value of that the variable that we just created, being our Jira Env or Jira Environment. And then we click Add. Then we can go back to our Jira Create Issue action that's on our Autom already and scroll down and find our output. We can then copy this output variable from the action control center and paste it back into our right cell 2 value area after the final hashtag. So it looks like this. Then after the last number or letter, depending what's there, we can put square brackets and then write key, so that it will give us the key for that specific ticket that was created. Then, finally, we just need to make sure that it saves the Excel sheet every single time. So we'll drag our Save Excel Sheet action, put it below the last right cell action, and inside the Action Control Center, we want to make it save the data table. And then in folder path, we need to click back on the Mate agent, and then under folder path, we need to click back on the Mate drive icon here, and we're going to add a new directory under the root, and we'll just call this Output Excel. Click Create, click on that, and select that folder. So now the folder path is going to be our new folder that we've just created, being Output Excel. So what these three actions are doing is they're writing the cells into the Excel sheet that we need, and then saving it before it's then sent in an email to whoever needs to receive it. To assign a file path to this variable, so we can just leave that blank. Then, again, I'm going to save the Autom to make sure we don't lose any of the progress that we've made. Then, for the assign file path to variable, we just need to create a new variable as a string, and we can just call this saved Excel and click save. And there we go. The final thing we need to do is just make sure that our email output is all filled in. So as you can see, I've got my host, my port, my username and password inputted, who it's coming from, the sender name, who it's going to, the person that wants to receive all the outputs of this Autom. I'm actually going to change the name to Jira Ticket Creator. The subject can be Ticket Creation Status. And then for the body, we're going to have this. Now this is our ticket status variable. You know it's a variable because it starts with 2 hashtags and ends with 2 hashtags. Then we're going to have our ticket link, which we made earlier using these right cells, being the Jira environment, create issue output, and then with our key at the end of it. That's the same as what we've got here in this box, because that's what we want the output of this email to have within it. Then we want to be able to add an attachment to the email that's going to hold the Excel sheet, and at least the latest version of the Excel sheet. So we'll go to where we have our save action. We'll copy our saved Excel variable path, go back to our email, go to attachments, custom string, and we can input that variable right there. This will make sure that with each new email sent, it will send the most recent updated Excel file, including that latest ticket creation or failure. And once that's done, you're all set. So let's zoom out and see what we've done. We can minimize this, so we've got a full view of the Autom that we've created here. So let's go over everything that we've put together. The Autom itself is using our email trigger. It's listening to an email inbox and waiting for emails to come in. You can then imagine that the Autom is opening our Excel file here and getting it ready to input whatever data we need. We then have our 2 conditions. If the value within the email is greater than 0, i.e. there's something to put in there, it will figure that out and create an issue within Jira using the parameters that we've set, or you could set yourself, of what you want that issue to create and have within it. Or it doesn't do that. And let's say the value is less than 0. It then just displays a message and says there was no data or there's an error. After the Autom has dealt with that, it will then write into the Excel sheet, firstly the ticket status, and then the link to that specific ticket. It will then save that into the Excel sheet and then send out an email to whichever email address you want it to send out, giving you the outcome of that specific email that's come into this Autom, whether that be ticket creation or error. This video was to get you familiar with how to actually use the Autom Mate platform, how to use the different actions, whether it be application actions or transform actions, and how to use variables, so you can store and manipulate data for different things. It should be noted that you don't have to use Jira for this, but the actual principle of how it was built and how it's put together is exactly the same, no matter which applications you're using. For more detailed information, you can visit our documentation linked within this course, automate.com today, to start automating your world.